Okay. We'll call this meeting to order, the April meeting of the Clemson Police Advisory Board. First, we will begin with our roll call. Myself, Lisa Robinson, present. Eunice Lehmacher.
Just walked in.
Okay. Got you present. Ryan Dean.
I'm here.
All right. Kevin Dell.
Here.
Gotcha. Winton Hunter.
Yep.
Got you. Dr. William King.
Present.
Thank you. Elaine Masseri. Here. Got you. Jeffrey Roberts, I understand he's on his way, and Ashby Williams is excused today for a track meet. We are meeting today in the community room at Fire Station 2 due to air conditioning issue at the city, but citizens on the line will still be able to call in to participate as normal. At this time, we'll have the approval of the agenda. Everyone should have it in front of them, as well as it's posted by the city online. Are there any changes, additions? Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second. Thank you. So moved and seconded.
Second.
By Elaine. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. All right, that carries. The agenda is approved. We'll now look at the previous minutes. Those would be the minutes from March 24th. Everyone has a copy in front of them, and also those are posted on the city's website. Were there any additions, changes, edits to the minutes? All right, can I get a motion to approve these?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Any seconds?
Second.
All right, approved, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that carries. The minutes are approved. We'll now open the line for the citizen comments. These are for topics that are not already on the agenda. The call-in number 864-653-9886, and we would ask that citizens hold their comments to 3 minutes.
We currently have no one on the line right now, but we'll leave it open for a little bit. If somebody pops up, we'll get back to them.
Okay. Do we have any citizens who'd like to comment from the floor?
Oh. Assuming she's here for an agenda item,
Okay.
so.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And for the record, Jeff Roberts just walked in, so.
All right, got you marked present. All right, we'll wait a few more minutes and see if anyone calls in. Otherwise, we'll move forward.
Well, what we could do is I can go ahead and do the department status and crime review while we're waiting to see if anybody gets online, and then if not, then I'll be done and we'll go on to the next item.
Sounds good.
Okay, so starting with department status, a week ago, this past Monday, we had an officer start who's our new SRO. That is Amanda Mills. She started at Clemson Elementary. She comes to us from the university, but she's been in law enforcement. She's been a law enforcement officer for over 10 years. She's worked with the Anderson County Sheriff's Office, the Seneca Police Department. She was an SRO when she was at the Anderson County Sheriff's Department, and she wanted to go back to being an SRO again. So we extended an offer. She accepted, and so this week has been her first week at the school, and so we now have our SRO position filled. That brings us down to 5 vacancies for officers, of which we have 6 in the process right now, currently going through their background and their polygraphs and all of the different things that we put our candidates through. As a matter of fact, I know between yesterday and today, 4 got their polygraphs done, so we're moving along there. Hopefully that everything will pan out and we'll extend officers to them. We have 1 officer in the academy down in Columbia. We have 1 officer in his field training. He just got back from the academy. I think he's in his 2nd week right now. We still have 2 dispatch vacancies. We have 4 that are in the background process right now. I'm hopeful that we'll at least get 1 out of that group. We've got candidates. They showed up for interviews. We have a fairly lengthy background packet that you have to fill out, and they're in the process of doing that, and some are not as diligent as getting them done as others. So hopefully that'll work out. As far as the building, we received finally our furniture for the new part of the building, and so now we're in the process of moving some of the older desks around. And so with the exception of some door mechanisms that need to be installed and then the video cameras, the building project will finally be will be done. So we're waiting on some supply chain issues to resolve themselves before we are completely done. This week was Victim Rights Week, and this month is Rape Awareness Month. And all this week, you may have been seeing some social media posts of our officers wearing teal to show support for our victims. We also had a room dedication this week. Our former victim advocate, Deborah Shockley, parents donated money to furnish what we call our soft interview room. And so we did some postings online about that. And what that is we don't want to interview sexual assault victims, domestic violence victims, people that were, victims of intimate violence, that kind of stuff. Don't want to interview them in a traditional interview room. It's too hard. It's too institutionalized looking, so on and so forth. So we try to provide a more comfortable space, and that's what this room is. So that dedication happened this week. And when we get down to our officer commendation review discussion, you'll see a memo that's in your packet where we added another award to the department award, and that's the life-saving award. And it's something I've been trying to get going for a little while now, but I have a multitude of excuses why I didn't get in the policy. But unfortunately, this past weekend, we had a 6-year-old that went under the water at 12 Mile Park and was rescued by several folks, including our officers. And so that basically prompted me to draft the memo and put it in there. This coming next council meeting, which is a week from today, they actually moved the council meeting from Monday to Thursday. But the next council meeting, they're going to be recognizing the citizens that assisted as well as the officers. And the young man was released from the hospital yesterday and is still going through some recovery. So if it wasn't for those folks, he would have drowned. So as far as our crime review, I mentioned before that Deborah left us, and she usually did the nice, pretty slides, so I'm going to try and shoot this out to you. So for the month of March, we had 1 rape reported. We had 4 burglaries reported. We had 25 burglary to vehicles reported. Those, again, are the ones where we see folks just going into cars randomly in apartment complexes and neighborhoods. But we had a rash of them in March. We had 3 vehicles stolen in March. Kind of order maintenance downtown between disorderly conduct, being drunk and disorderly. We had 28 arrests that were made, and then 8 DUI arrests were made. We had 14 charges for driving under suspension. And as far as citations written for the month of March, we wrote 301. About 125 of those were for speeding, the rest were for a variety of other violations. One other thing that we did this month was actually it was this past Saturday, we did a driver's license checkpoint at Issaquena and Pendleton. and it was in the evening time. Actually, it wasn't Saturday, it was Friday. And 40 violations were cited from that detail, and that detail, I think, ran 3 hours. So in that 3-hour time period, 40 violations were observed going through that intersection. That was right down the street from you, yeah. So, and in addition, the other thing that, I don't have the stats, which kind of gets, left out, but I'll just say year to date, you know, we don't always write tickets for traffic violations, those kind of things. So when we do stop somebody for a traffic violation, by law, we have to do a warning, and that's logged. And year to date, so from January 1st until yesterday, we had at least 278 people warned for speeding. And I have to add this total up. I want to say it was over, pushing close to 500 actual warnings issued since January to now. So if you add that to the tickets that were written, you know, our officers are doing a lot of traffic stops. With the limited number of officers that we have, because sometimes we only have a sergeant and 2 officers working during a shift, and they're still producing those numbers. So, and I believe that's it for our department status and crime review, if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, I had a question about the victim's advocate. Do you know when that person will be, when Deborah will be replaced?
So Deborah's position was replaced by Sonia Morton.
Okay.
But Sonia doesn't know how to do this crime stats like Deborah did.
Okay.
Deborah learned that over many, many years, and Sonia's new to the position. She was our traffic enforcement officer, our parking enforcement officer, and she started on-the-job training to be a victim advocate, and so she's still learning that role, but doing a great job since she's filled those shoes. So for the time being, I'm going to have to play with the numbers.
Okay. And do you know what's accounting for all of these? I mean, is it just opportunity, all these car break-ins at this particular time?
Yes, and so it's, I've talked about this before, and we're not, it's not an isolated incident to Clemson, this is everywhere, but in college towns, it's not uncommon for folks to leave stuff in their car, leave their cars unlocked, and groups coming from other areas just walking through the complexes, tugging on door handles, that find the door open, they rummage through the car and they steal stuff. It's happened in Clemson before I got here. It happened in Gainesville all the time. But it's not just, I don't want to make it sound like it's just college kids too, because they do the same thing in Anderson, they do the same thing in Greenville. We had a group that hit us a couple of months ago, and we caught the car that was used by the individuals. There was like 5 of them on video, and we found out later the car got recovered on the interstate coming into Greenville, and it was actually stolen. So they stole the car somewhere, used it to go doing their thieving, and then they abandoned the car out on the interstate. So it's a common tactic, usually amongst youthful, young adults, older teenagers in that age group.
Any other questions for Chief on the department status or crime review?
Do we have anybody on the line? Okay.
No.
Got anyone on the line? I guess we'll close public comment.
Okay, we can move on to officer commendation, review, and discussion. So this is an idea that was brought up by Jeffrey Roberts. And Jeff, you want to tell us the idea for having us look at commendations and kind of review that?
Yeah, I just thought it would be a responsibility for people to actually review something and how to say so in it. And so I got with the chief and talked to him about that it was a good thing, and lend a little more credibility to the season that people outside of law enforcement are, you know, on their side and, you know, give them some back on us when they do a good job.
So, just a question, well, so in your packet, I had our policy that identifies the awards that we have in the department, plus the memo that I recently wrote. And so what I would ask is, as the way our nomination process, normally they write the nomination out on a form, an award nomination form, and it goes through a process. So what I assume you're recommending is, as part of that process, instead of it just going to command staff and command staff voting on it, we bring it to the board and have you all review it, and if you agree with the issuance of the award, then you state that.
Yeah, like for instance, in Phoenix, when I was an officer out there, when I received a couple of savings medals, and I know that it went through a review board. I mean, they didn't hand that stuff out like candy, so it was, you know, pretty intense review board. A lot of people got to read what the incident was about and make it, and they denied a lot of them. They did it, took it very serious, and, you know, I think it just lends a little more credibility than just their peers, you know, saying yes and signing off on it, you know.
Do you want to have some department members present for that discussion? So, and the reason why I ask this is, in our current policy, and I'm probably going to have to change it, but in our current policy, we have a awards committee that's supposed to be made up of other department members, and I got like very little participation in that initial committee, and I assume it's because they're not used to receiving awards, because I added awards to the policy shortly after I got here, and so they're not used to that process. So the reason why I ask that is sometimes they can give you a historical perspective of how awards may have been given in the past, which, in my inquiry, there's not a lot that have been given in the past. So we may be creating or starting a precedent here. So you tell me if that's something you want to do, or if you want them to look at it first and say yay or nay, and then kick it to y'all, or you all look at it first and then kick it to them, or just make a collective.
So would it work if we had a subcommittee of board members to be on that review committee within the department? And so maybe 3 or 4 of our board members would be on that, committee to go through that review process?
If that's what you would like to do, I'm good with that. That kind of takes the debate back and forth out of the public limelight, per se. Not to say that people can't attend, but it's not a formal meeting like we're having now, and we're debating over whether the award is worthy or not.
I think it would be better to do it that way.
Subcommittee, and then the subcommittee either refer it back to the full group and just announce the award, or
I'll be on that.
would you also want to, because we don't have anything formalized set up right now, but would you be willing or able, to have the officers that receive the award come before the board and receive the award from the board?
I would think so, sure.
Okay. Okay. All right, well, I will kind of draft like a little procedure there for how that flow will work, and I'll bring it back to you and.
Okay, we can put on it at the next meeting.
At the next meeting, okay.
All right, thank you, Jeff, for that. That's really great idea.
All right.
Okay, the next thing we have is National Night Out. And this, I think, was a date discussion, because typically coincides with when school starts. And so if the department was going to do something, might not get the best attendance with parents and students.
So typically it's the first or second Tuesday of August, and that's actually the first day of school again this year coming up.
Yeah,
So,
August 2nd, right?
Yeah.
The first day of school. So could we do it that week before, last week in July? Is there a reason why that would be a problem?
Not, the only thing that I can think of that might be an issue with that is, a lot of people, that's when their vacations are finishing up, or they go, and so, that's a guess on my part, because people are finishing their beach runs and all that before school starts, and the heat, in the middle of, the end of July, so it's one of the hottest times of the year.
Yeah.
A lot of the departments around the country, most of them that are doing this, they're your typical, the school year doesn't start till after Labor Day, and it gets, the sun goes down, it gets a little cooler, it's not as warm, it's not as hot. I'm not gonna say some of those places aren't hot, because they are, but, so it's a different dynamic. And I know we here, especially here, deal with, if we try to push it a little bit further into the fall, now we're competing with football.
Right.
And then not only are we competing with football, we could pick like an away game weekend or something like that, but that's when everybody else here locally is waiting to do something because it's an away game weekend. So I'm willing to do whatever. I'm just looking for recommendations as to when would be the best time to do it, and then where we're gonna have it.
Eunice, did you want to move to the table? I don't want to leave you out of discussion.
I'm listening.
Okay, good. The week after school starts, that week, and is it typically one evening, or would you want to have something on a weekend?
It's typically one evening. Once school starts, though, having something in the evening after school starts is usually problematic because of everything that's surrounding school.
So the conclusion is, no matter what date you pick for
It's gonna be a
your
problem.
is it relevant to talk about what we're planning to do before we pick a date? So it sounds like you're targeting children and families because we're talking about school so much. Who are we targeting? What are we doing? When would be a good date for them?
Well, the whole idea behind National Night Out is to get the police to work better with the neighborhoods and to kind of bring down the barriers or roadblocks that are out there. And they usually try to have it in the neighborhoods that are more strained than others. So the last time we discussed this, there was a multitude of things that came up, and one of the ideas I had, I kind of stole from my previous chief, was, okay, well, we'll just walk through the neighborhoods. Well, the neighborhoods you walk through are the ones that have more issues than others. And so when I brought that up, those neighborhoods got very suspicious as to why I wanted to walk through their neighborhoods. So rather than ruffle feathers or whatever, I abandoned that thought process and said, okay, let's figure something out next year. I know that Eunice has brought up some ideas of a particular location and doing it in conjunction with. Now, I don't have there was one thought about partnering with Little John and doing it at Little John and just have people come to Little John, which I don't mind doing either. And if to get it back off the ground again, if that's what we need to do, and just have the event and then build on it, year after year from there, then that's fine. And anybody in the Clemson community is invited to come. It's not that we're trying to single any one group out over another, but it's, typically in middle-class neighborhoods, there's not a big barrier between the police and that community. And so that's the whole goal of National Night Out, is to try to bring some of those barriers down, let people see who we are, that kind of stuff. And I have a lot of new officers, so there's a lot of people in Clemson that are eager to meet who these officers are, and this would be a good event for that, so I can get as many of them there and to just meet them. I've had some citizens that say they want to know the officer that patrols their neighborhood all the time. Well, they move around all the time because staffing, they're not in one spot all the time. They're always, so maybe an event like this is where I can get as many of them there as possible, and then people could just start to meet who they are and when they work and that kind of stuff.
So I've seen events like this where it's maybe held at a park and the officers are there, you know, playing games with the kids, things like that. Maybe there's some food trucks or something, you know, to create that kind of atmosphere, and maybe show a movie, you know, outside movie, that kind of thing. You know, make it family friendly and,
You thinking metal?
you know, maybe someplace like that. You know, but the issue remains when.
Right. So if we just want to do something maybe one evening, I would think maybe a Saturday evening that's not a, so football doesn't start until, what is it, September 3rd, is that right?
And that's also Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, so, but public school starts August 2nd.
Right.
So
Maybe that's,
maybe August 13th? Because that's before the college students really start coming back, right? And it's after, it's the second Saturday after the start of school.
oh, so the second Saturday.
Yeah, so school starts on the 2nd. The first Saturday would be the 6th. The second Saturday would be the 13th. And I don't see anything on my calendar, but that doesn't mean that there's something planned that I'm unaware of. The other option would be August 20th. And we can plan it in the evening time as the sun's coming down, and like you said, for a movie. But that time of the year, it gets dark late.
And I think that's getting close to the start of the semester.
Right.
And
20th.
I move in and all of that. So it's just a, you know,
We could do
down.
we could do the movie thing, but just remember, if we're gonna do an outdoor movie, it's gonna be late. And that's why I'm saying a Saturday.
Yeah.
You could do Fitzpatrick Square has that big green area across from Joe's.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
You could do like a pizza party with the police or something.
I'm thinking Rotary Park. I know, not Rotary Park. What is it called? The one on 76 and, the old Stone Church Road?
Dawson Park.
Oh,
And the
that's awesome.
reason I'm thinking of Dawson Park is because that's a park where the community is there pretty much every evening playing basketball, right? So you go to Nettles in the evening, who's there? You go to Patrick Square, you got rich folks there going out to eat, right? But if you want to capture, I don't know what the crime stuff is there, but Dawson Park has the youth already there playing basketball.
So the youth leagues are already out.
And if you had a couple officers that played basketball, and they showed up and played, if the youth were willing to do that, and you gave them food, drinks, and maybe the officer shows up the week before and says, next week we're going to be here and giving out whatever, come, bring your friends, we'd like to play you. You know, you want to do a officers versus teenagers, I don't know. Plus, there is a lot of open space there, there's parking, so you could set up. There's not enough parking to set up a big movie night with hundreds of people, but there's enough space to set up chairs and...
Just people bring blankets and that kind of thing, yeah.
And a screen, and it is also on a main road, so even people, so I'm thinking you're driving home from wherever, and you say, touch a police car, right? Let the kids come in and sit in the police car, take a picture, and it's more visible. Nettles is this very hidden park, right?
Yeah.
Patrick Square is visible too, but visible to who people.
And the large community type events, from what I understand, prior to my arrival, were done at that park. I think one of the former lieutenants, Crooks, used to have an event there and had a lot of vendors there, and it was during the summertime, and that was a meeting area. And that's right across the street from what they call Red Hill, which is traditionally an African-American neighborhood.
And the trailer park is there, and expansion space, we could talk to Fort Hill, you know, the Old Stone Church is there for parking. So we could ask Fort Hill if they'd come out and do something and let us use their parking space, and maybe we could have a historian come and talk about there's some famous people buried there probably, that's the original Fort Hill Church. So it offers a variety of things.
Okay.
Plus, the youth are already there at night, is what I'm.
So I guess it sounds like our recommendation is.
August 13th.
On the 13th.
I mean, talk to your officers, because it does actually offer a police problem with parking, right? Because you know there's not that much parking there.
True, but the church on the back side of it might be willing to allow us to use their parking area there.
And Fort Hill, and if you've got both of those churches to be co-sponsors, so one of my ways to get people to come is have them do something, right? So that little Baptist church does something, like you say, we'll provide you the food, but will you grill it, right? And you say to the other church, can we use your parking and can you do a historical tour? That gets people to come, and then they talk about it among themselves and say, we're coming to grill for the police, you want to come, right? The more volunteers you have, the more people you get.
When you talk
So
about food trucks, are you
Yeah.
Are you
That was
saying the city
Lisa.
pays
Oh,
for
I
it?
just said that I've seen that done before, but I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
That's a great idea too.
I think that's the kind of thing that draws a lot of people, even if you're not necessarily gonna do the basketball or staying for the outdoor movie. Everyone will come by to pick up something from a food truck and, you know, see what's going on.
Yeah, we did that international festival on Friday night, and there was 2,000-3,000 people on Bowman Field, and we were just like shocked at that.
Yeah.
We
Everybody
heard
wanted
about
something
it
to eat.
after it was over, so
Yeah.
it wasn't good.
Well, there was no food left, but that happens with food trucks sometimes too, but if we get a good enough food truck and do enough publicity,
Yeah, you only need a
now
couple.
you're drawing your adult and young adult population.
Yeah.
Okay, do we want to put like a small work group together to continue this conversation and
Probably.
then just report back to the board at the end of each month?
Yeah, sure, we can do that.
Who wants to be on it?
Interested in
I'll
doing
do
that.
it.
I don't mind working on that.
I'll do it, you do it.
I'll do it, but Lisa, don't volunteer for everything. Your time is moving in other places, so I see you at lots of meetings.
Yes, that is true, yeah.
So I have Kevin, Eunice, who else?
Lisa volunteers,
Lisa.
but I think she's over volunteering for everything.
And you know, Ashby's not here and I don't want to speak for her, but this may be something she'd be interested in, so
That's a great idea.
reach out to her.
And we should tell her if you don't show up, you get volunteers, just as a principal.
True, yeah, but
Yeah.
missed it. I guess you walked in late. She's at a track meet tonight, so she's excused, yeah. So,
Okay.
'cause she could probably tell me more what her age group would be interested in and would like to see there, and that way we can guide it to something that they'll enjoy.
Brian, what's your thoughts, by the way?
My thoughts, I guess as far as time frame, that's definitely the time frame I'd go for. And then location, I'd say open area, some type of food, some type of activity, and generate. You gotta generate as much volunteers, like you say, as possible, to generate more people to get there.
Yeah.
I think that's very helpful, very beneficial. But
Okay.
I definitely think it needs to be played, like you say, before the college people get back here. Because otherwise, traffic is a disaster when they get back.
And
Moving weekend.
Eunice, I chuckled when you said the crime rate over there, because, those apartment complexes get hit all the time with burglaries, so their crime rate's gonna be through the roof, because of the college students that live there. But other violent crime, that kind of stuff, it's, we don't really see anything over there, so. Okay,
All right, so that takes care of that.
all right,
We can move on to the discussion on the changes to the tethering ordinance and the vote to refer to city council. So everyone should have the updated tethering ordinance in front of you, draft. And so we had a subcommittee meet to go over doing some wordsmithing, looking at the language, putting together the draft that we could have today for the vote, and we definitely appreciate the work of those on that subcommittee. And at this time, if there's any questions or comments with regard to the ordinance, if not, we can we can move for a vote. Anyone have any?
I have a question, I haven't read it all in detail, but, section 4.9, animal must be over 12 months of age. Having had puppies to train them, a real great way to train a puppy is to have them on a really long tether and teach them to come, right, when you're outside. So, if you try to do that without a tether, it doesn't work, right, because they just run across the street. So I don't know, how did y'all pick 12 months for that?
I think I suggested it because of leaving them.
Yeah, no, I
No.
wouldn't be good to leave a puppy, but if I'm
Puppy.
training a puppy to come, I'm gonna put him on a super long lead, I'm gonna stake it down and walk away, and
But you're gonna be there, yeah, I mean,
You're
it's
present.
like
The idea is that you're within visual,
Yeah, you're
visual
within
range.
visual.
no, I see, it
Yeah,
says
yeah.
unlawful
Yeah.
to tether the animal outdoors.
I think that was the purpose of that, was even leaving a puppy for 4 hours or whatever, yeah.
But it says I can't tether them at all if they're under 12 months, is what I'm saying. Or the way it's written, is that correct?
Correct.
And I'm saying that's a bad idea if you're training a puppy, at least how my dog trainer told me to train my puppies. So I agree, you shouldn't leave them and at that age and disappear, but I'm opposed to never tether an animal under 12 months, because I think you kind of have to train them.
What,
Are there any other sections?
so Eunice, would you, and I'm asking, Elaine also, I understand where you're coming with that. Do you want to make an exception for unless you're doing an attended training session using the tether?
That's fine.
Okay, I think what we'll do is mark up, and then, we can do a motion with any changes and things to vote on those. And did we have a member of the public who wanted to comment?
Yes.
For this, in this section?
Yeah, that's her.
Okay, we can go ahead and open for public comment, and then we'll continue with the discussion. Yes, you can go ahead.
So my name's Amanda. I'm going to introduce myself. I live in Clemson, and I've lived in Clemson my whole life. I've lived here. I own a business here now, which has been wonderful. Yeah, I don't own a dog, but I do have friends who own dogs, and I just love Clemson. What concerned me, and the reason I'm here, is because I read this, and it seemed the 4 hours specifically, and between the 12-hour period, it seems like it would be really a good idea for some breeds and some like companion animals, but just not taking into consideration all other animals. And the same with the 36-degree Fahrenheit or snow, because I know we have a lot of huskies in Clemson, and it might be their first chance to finally not be hot. And I just felt 36 degrees was not fair to all breeds. I thought a lot of them were really good, like the preventing injury, that's great. I thought on section 8 where it says access to clean water, food, and shelter, yes, great, but the food thing kind of bothered me a little bit because dogs shouldn't always have access to food because they'll just keep on eating it always. It's really overweight. So in the South Carolina law, when it talks about adequate food, it says adequate food, which they define as even if it's at intervals that's appropriate for nourishing the dog, so that we're not saying you have to have a bowl of food out there continually because all dogs. I know my little dog when I was growing up, if he had access to food, he was eating all of it, all at once, no restraints. We had to give him in sections. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is really great stuff. The section 13 where it said no less than 15 feet in length, a lot of feet. I don't know where did we get that number from for that feet. I would argue as long as the dog is safe, it doesn't need to be a limit on single unit.
Which number is that?
Sorry, 13.
13.
Mm-hmm.
She's talking about the trolley system.
And then my last concern is number 2, where it's in visual range of a responsible party, because that would they can never go anywhere, right? You can never tell them outside, let them enjoy a beautiful day, and then go get groceries. That's not allowed under the law, and so I think it takes away a very legitimate option for dog owners to allow their dog to be outside and enjoying the outside, and since we have nuisance laws, that's the other thing. We have nuisance laws, so if they're barking continually on this tether and they're experiencing, we have laws against that, but I think that an owner should be able to tether their dog, let it enjoy the outside, and go get groceries. Or maybe they have to go to work, and if the dog is happy outside and they're not a nuisance and they're enjoying the outside, I think that should be allowed. For 4 hours, I think restrains that. And it's, like, if I was a dog owner and this law was enacted, I would just have to crate my dog for the whole time. And that, I think, would be way worse and allowable under the law, but maybe not the best option for the dog.
All right, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate your comments. So what we need to do this evening is look at this, make any changes to it that we would like to, vote on it, and move it to council for them to consider the draft and to vote on that. So are there any?
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I received an email today from our city attorney who wanted to pass along a comment from a citizen. If you look at section 4-9, section 5, where it says a tether has to have the following properties, under D it says the total weight does not exceed 10% of the animal's body weight. And the question was brought up, well, what if it's a very small breed dog? How do you determine, especially if the dog weighs like 2 pounds, 10% of 2 pounds, can you get a tether that will be able to hold on to the dog? And so just for purpose and clarity and transparency, I'll say what I said last week is much of the ordinance that we're talking about here are guidelines for what a responsible tethering would be, more so than getting down to, am I going to take a ruler out and measure the thickness of the collar that's holding the dog that's tethered? If the dog is tethered and it's in distress or it's not being treated properly, these are the guidelines that we're going to use. Doesn't mean that we're going to go around and weigh so one of the reasons why this is in here is we all agree, and we've heard from members of our community, that putting a logging chain around a dog in a front yard is too heavy of a chain to tether the dog. But we're trying to put into words to say that that's wrong. And I think that's why this says 10% of the dog's weight. If you're going to tether a Chihuahua, and what you're tethering them with is not, it's a piece of rope, and it's not weighing down on a dog that has a logging chain or a heavy chain around it, then the officer's going to make a judgment call and go, that's a reasonable tether. So I just wanted to bring that up for like I said, transparency and clarity. Some of the things that you see in here are more guidelines than there are something that we're going to use and say, oh, you're in violation because your rope is a quarter pound heavier than it should be. We're not going to get into the weeds when it comes to that.
Are there any other suggestions? I would suggest taking into consideration Eunice's comment with regard to what she said was an exception for appropriate training for a dog of that age, an animal of that age, and then on number 6, taking into consideration the citizen comments, maybe adding, depending upon breed temperature guidelines.
Tell me your name again. Amanda. If you'll look at point number 3 on 4.9, you can leave the property and not be in visual range for 4 hours.
Nope.
You have to follow all the rules at once.
That's what I'm asking, I guess.
Yeah, I think number 2, right before number 3, says that you have to be in visual range.
Because we discussed that at length last time.
Yeah, but in the subcommittee, it was back. So you weren't in the subcommittee.
Yeah. All right.
So this is the language that came out of the subcommittee, looking at all of the recommendations and discussing it.
The animal has to be in visual range.
Correct. And I'll try to surmise the example that was brought up in the subcommittee. One of the members of the, well, I won't say one of the attendees brought up an example that there are communities that do not allow for fences. And so they wanted to give an exception for a person to tether a dog in a neighborhood that doesn't allow for fences, and wanted that person to be visually watching the animal because no fence would be up to protect not only the animal, but to keep unwanted people from getting onto the property while the animal was tethered. And I think that's how this came back in, and I see Elaine shaking her head because I think she was part of that discussion. That individual made other arguments as to why tethering shouldn't be allowed anywhere else in the city under any other circumstance, because fences could be erected. But I think we would be disingenuous if we allowed people that couldn't have fences because of their homeowners' guidelines to tether, and people that could have fences and say they can't tether. So I think that would be disingenuous, and I think that's how these got back into the ordinance.
Because I got a call about it, the Downs, for instance.
Yeah.
Can't have fences. So the people tether their dogs out there, but they sit there and watch their dogs so they can get exercise. But
Yeah.
that's the only option they have, actually.
Yeah, I'm totally okay with that. But I think as it stands, I agree with Amanda. I think they should be allowed to be 4 hours out of range or view, less than 4 hours. I'd be okay with that.
So what you're recommending then is we remove 2 again.
Round 2, I would say. 4.92.
That's what she's recommending.
But it's just
Changing 4 to
No, just striking 2. Striking number 2, saying that you can tether your animal for 4 hours without having to be visually present while it's being tethered.
which, as she said, if you have a choice of, keeping them in a crate, and I believe I gave the example, or your house is hotter on the inside than it is on the outside because you don't have air conditioning, so you can't keep the hot dog inside, keeping them outside is better, and you might have to run an errand, right? So it's actually safer for the dog, I think, in those cases.
And one thing I will say, and for prosperity's sake, is you're voting to take this to the council. Doesn't mean the council will vote it all in its entirety. The council may decide to tweak some of these things before they put it into law. So, I'm assuming you're gonna present this to council, and when you do, you may wanna just inform them of that there were some board members that felt this way about this particular part of the ordinance, and there were, community members that voiced this, but, it may be something that you ask them to do, which I'll have to double check, but it's on the agenda for next Thursday.
I
Council
wonder
meeting.
if that's the reason that the Greenville, because I wondered why they had 2 hours in there instead of 4. And now I'm wondering if the reason that they had 2 hours in there is because they didn't have the visual, and so it gave the opportunity for the dog owner to pick on the dogs more often.
Yeah, I'll have to check.
You know
I don't
what I'm
know
saying? Yeah.
their ordinance well enough to know if it's the
I
visual.
can't remember,
There.
but it was curious to me that they had 2 hours, and I thought, wow, but then you'd have to check on your dog if you had it tethered every 2 hours. You didn't have to be there, but you'd at least have to check on it.
Yeah, but I mean,
I'm just,
on a tether when I'm
Yeah.
gardening, and I usually take her with me to the next spot I'm gardening, but when I'm going to get mulch,
yeah,
I'm out of view from her. She's
Right.
still quite happy because she knows I'm coming back, right? And sometimes somebody calls me, so it's more than 10 minutes, right?
I
So-
think that was the discussion we had
Yeah.
prior, that if you needed to run to the store, if you had to pick up a child,
Right.
if it was, half day of work, that
Yeah.
you would have an opportunity,
I have the Greenville ordinance pulled up, and it has in here, the animal is in visual range of the responsible party, and the responsible party is located outside with the animal. That is in Greenville's ordinance.
I guess, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, my thing is, it's not necessarily, I'm not arguing the actual concept of it, what everybody's going for is good. But yet, the problem is we end up getting tied up, chasing around, trying to quantify and make it into a enforceable violation. And then you end up with a 3-page long deal of you can't do this, but you can't do this, and there's hard cutoffs and specifics, and ultimately it's gonna come down to officer discretion. But the problem is you're gonna vote this or push this to be voted into an ordinance where it is well, it says here, technically you can't do this. So then, people that are very particular about following rules are gonna look at it and say, oh, well, it makes sense to do it this way, and kind of plays back into a big gray area. So, I don't know, I guess my biggest, not grief with the whole thing, but like grief with the length of it is the fact that we're trying to quantify something that's more so common sense, but you gotta quantify it in a way, and we're making it 3 pages long. And introducing a lot of gray area and a lot of other problems that could be too detailed, too specific.
There's 2 types of law. There's spirit of law and there's letter of the law. We're trying to dive into the letter of the law way too much here. Like you said, it is officer's discretion at the end of the day. I think this is way too detailed.
But the problem is you put something detailed like this in an ordinance and then becomes, it is officer's discretion, but then technically these weird things are technically enforceable, so.
Which helps sometimes.
I can use example after example, but this may be a bad one, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Speed limits. They're absolute, right? But at what point do we start issuing citations? Well, not in every state, but in this state and in other states, there, 25 miles an hour speed limit, that's the limit. You're doing 26, you can get stopped and get ticketed for doing 26. Now, is an officer gonna give you a ticket for 26 miles an hour? Probably not. Are they gonna give you a ticket for 30 miles an hour? Probably not. But if you're doing 30 miles an hour and there's 16 kids in a row playing, you may get a ticket.
Yeah, but
Okay.
this to me, like on Ryan's point, this to me, reading this is like speed limit. Speed limit is 55 miles an hour, unless your car is 1985 or older, and then it's 45, and unless you have this grade of tire, you can go to 60. That's to me what this is doing. Now, I 100% agree with the speed limit thing, but I don't agree with speed limits. I'm just kidding. I understand exactly what you're saying, but I think what they're saying is that, you can do this speed limit, but, here's all the qualifications to be able to do that speed limit.
And that's why I say, a lot of what you have here are guidelines, so we're gonna look at the totality of the circumstances to see if the person is really violated it and needs to be cited for it.
I think we have to remember too, that we're not talking about the county. We're talking about in town, in the city of Clemson, where we are in close proximity to our neighbors and our neighbors' children and our neighbors' dogs. And I'm just thinking about my neighborhood, and I'm not even near as close as a lot of neighborhoods in this town. So, what we do with our animals, has, effects our neighbors. So, in my neighborhood, we all have dogs, and all of them bark, and some of them are running around, and the neighbors have to catch the dogs, and this and that, so, sometimes, we have to be, we all have common sense. We don't need this. But there's a lot of people that don't have any common sense. Like my neighbors just moved in, they're renting, and they're letting their dogs run loose in the neighborhood. And I don't know who's gonna go tell them, but somebody needs to. They let their dogs out. They got 3 dogs. We don't. We're all fenced in, the rest of us. So we get, and so, what are we gonna say? You can't do this, but if we don't have some guidelines that the police follow, they can't do anything about that.
Well, shall we move to motions? I can make a motion. I move on section 4.9(1) that it read, the animal must be over 12 months of age except in the case of training puppies where the owner is present.
Correct.
Except in the case of training puppies where it doesn't have.
I would say, to be less wordy, except when conducting attended training.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yes, yes.
I accept a friendly amendment. Is there a second?
Okay. Ready to call a question? And this is on the full ordinance with this change.
No, this is on this motion to change.
Just the motion for this change, okay. All right, are you ready to call the question on this change? All those in favor of this change to number one?
Aye.
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 Okay. Oh, thank you, Bill, okay. All right, that carries, so we've got that change.
And then I have a second motion to strike 4.9, number 2.
Okay, is there a second on that?
Second.
Second. Okay, ready to call the question? All those in favor of striking, number 2? Line number 2?
Which is, you have to be in,
Reread that line 2
That's-
specifically again.
he wants to repeat what number 2 says.
Number 2
Yeah.
is, says the animal is in visual range of the responsible party.
Yes. Thank you.
The motion is to strike that.
Yes, I second.
I apologize for interrupting. You're making a motion on policy that's drafted. If you're making a motion on it to amend it, you don't make a motion to amend step by step. You choose them, and then someone would make a motion right now, I'm just saying because I've been at every council meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Make a motion on this, and someone seconds, or they don't. Someone says, I'd like to make an amended motion to cross number 2, change this to word this, instead of going step by step. That's how they've always done it at council, so it doesn't.
So we can go through the entire document and then
Yeah.
vote on that.
Right,
Is that, okay.
but based on what we've said, does anybody anticipate any other changes other than striking this one?
There's that one, and then, adding to 9.6, depending upon the, breed temperature guidelines.
So, okay. That's not part of Eunice's current motion, she would have to amend it to include it.
It's not part of my current motion.
Yeah, her current motion, but I think there needs to be discussion on that, because we haven't discussed that part yet. My question is gonna be, how do I know what breed it can be? She brought the husky, which I think we can all agree, a husky can be in cold weather, but what other breed of dog can be in cold weather? So now we're gonna run into subjectivity. And so if we go to that one, so if we're okay with leaving Eunice's motion the way it is now and voting on it, and then having a discussion about the next one, then I don't wanna merge the two together, because then it may fail.
Okay, so we have voted on and approved the motion on 1.
Right.
We are now
Motion and second to strike number 2.
number 2, and I'm gonna call the vote on that again, because I don't think everyone voted on that,
No, you didn't vote yet.
vote on that. All those in favor of striking number 2?
Aye.
6, okay, so that carries. And then now we are at the discussion of number 6, which deals with the animal is not outside during extreme temperature, including but not limited to above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or below 36 degrees Fahrenheit, snow, hail, tornadoes, thunderstorms, tropical storms, or hurricanes. And it was suggested by citizen comment that take into consideration the breed, temperatures that they can be in. Is there further discussion on that?
I think we need a motion, so I would say, how about we make the motion, number 6, the animal is not outside during extreme weather period. Leaves it up to the police officer's discretion.
So she made a motion.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a second on the motion? And then we can discuss it after that. That's why I'm bringing it up.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I would be
Second.
Okay, so for discussion, and Elaine's probably gonna chime in here, but if I recall correctly, Elaine, the document that you presented to the subcommittee from the Humane Society, that's where that language came from, am I correct?
Correct. I don't have a problem with the temperatures being depending on breed guidelines. But what I do have a problem with is leaving it up, just generally saying, or extreme weather. Because extreme weather could be a lot of things to a lot of people.
That's true, but I trust the police officers to know this dog was outside for 12 hours in hail, and that's a violation. And I trust the courts to say, yep, that counts as extreme. So,
I don't know.
Is that
You would have,
is that an enforceable guideline? Is that?
yeah.
I think,
I think there could be an argument from the dog owner.
I would say, from a police standpoint, that officer has to justify his actions. So I can almost guarantee you that in his report, the climate will be dictated in his report, possibly even the temperature of the dog. Because I know we used to carry, little numbers, and the breed of the dog. So he has to justify his actions. So if he's gonna write a report that, a Chihuahua is out at, 32-degree temperature, he's gonna list the breed of the dog, the time of the night, day or night, what the conditions were outside. And I don't think there's an officer out there that's gonna write a report at 36 degrees on a husky that's rolling around in the little bit of powdered snow that's out there, so that's not gonna.
and I'll point out too, this is saying you cannot tether your animal in those weather conditions. It's not saying that if the animal is in distress, that the person couldn't be subjected to animal neglect or cruelty because of those extreme conditions. This is just saying you can't tether them in these extreme conditions.
and so what I'm saying, Elaine, is if the citizen complains and says it wasn't extreme weather and they go to court, there's the officer saying, yeah, well, it was a Chihuahua and it was 4 degrees outside. And there's a citizen saying, I do that all the time, and the judge is gonna say, no, I agree with the officer, right? So I trust the judge and I trust the officer to only.
But I guess what I'm saying is the definition for extreme, somebody could interpret, Joe Blow can interpret extreme and say, well, I thought this wasn't extreme. And then,
But the officer would enforce that it was extreme, and that would be written
And let
into
them
the
go
report.
to court and counter that and let the judge decide. I don't think we have to specify. That's what I'm saying.
I agree.
Are there any other discussion or thoughts on this one?
So are we thinking about taking out, sorry,
So
the temperature bracket?
The amendment is that point 6 will say the animal is not outside during extreme weather, period, and the entire remaining part of the sentence is gone. That's the amendment.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Ready to call the question? Okay, all those in favor of that amendment?
Aye.
To 6? So that motion carries.
And so to clarify, we're just removing the temperatures?
We're removing every
Period after
word
weather.
after, including, and every word after it. So the sentence ends after weather and there is no further.
Okay, I think this is the extent of everything that we've discussed with regard to that this evening. Anything further before we go ahead and vote on the document that we now have with these changes?
I would like to say that the committee did a great job addressing some of the other things we brought up, whoever's on it, thank you. So I think it's been made much better, I like it. I'm sorry I made these pitchy points, but I appreciate a citizen coming, and she's made some good points.
Okay, so can I get a motion on the floor to vote on? Oh, I thought you were going to. Okay. Oh, okay, I thought you had. You give me a point of order. Do we have a motion on the floor for the document as it stands now with these amended changes?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved. Second, anyone?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Ready to call the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, all those opposed? All right, the motion carries. So this is what will, with the amended changes, is what will be presented to council, and apparently I'll be doing that on Thursday.
Yes.
Next week, okay.
So,
Great.
just for the board, it is a public meeting. Anyone that's on this board that wants to attend and speak to the council, regarding this can do that. I mean, you're all citizens, so you have the right to say whatever, and I know some of you feel strongly about certain parts of it, and you want to voice that to council, you can do that as well. So just let you know.
Okay, so next we have board member open discussion. The only thing I have for this is just to note that the subcommittee working group is continuing to work on the special event ordinance. We did have an initial meeting. We're looking at other ordinances in other college towns, that things that would be relevant. And as we continue to work on that, we'll bring a draft to the body to vote on once we have that completed. Any other discussion?
I have two things. One is, could we get added to the agenda in the future the names of all committees now? So there was this one, there's that one, and now we have a subcommittee about, maybe just write down what the committees are in case they want to report. And the second question I have is, based on that letter we sent out asking for the $2,000 for the officers that live in the city, that was passed on to the city. Did anything happen related to that?
Nothing has happened. I know I've had conversations with the mayor about it and with the administrator. They're still going through the budget process, and they still haven't gotten the revenues, the projected revenues yet for the city. So everybody that's proposed budget items, it's just proposed at this point. Nothing's been slashed, nothing's been removed, added. Matter of fact, some people are still adding things. But there has been some discussion. So next time I talk to the mayor, I'll ask him if there's, because it hasn't gone before the full council. So if he has some response that he would like to give the group, then he can.
Tell him we asked, and if they're concerned about the money, I would simply say back, this will probably cost the city zero, because it still doesn't give officers enough money to live in the city. The salary plus $2,000 is still not enough.
Right.
So this is a zero expense that at least makes a statement, and if some officer takes it up on it, it's worth the $2,000. So be sure to tell them it's not a money question, it's more a statement question.
Now, and I do know in part of those discussions, because they had asked me, there are a few articles that have come out as of late, one of them being out of Philadelphia, where they've abandoned the requirement for officers to live inside the jurisdiction that they patrol, plus also some other similar policies that other cities they're abandoning now because of the shortage of officers nationwide. They're abandoning a lot of the requirements, but then some of the incentives, there's no data to show that it's incentivizing them to come into the city. There is actually articles out there where there are officers who prefer not to live in the jurisdiction they patrol simply because they want an escape from their job, and they don't want to be constantly approached about stuff in their job. So a lot of them will live outside of their jurisdiction to reduce that. It's bad enough that once somebody finds out you're a police officer, they all have legal questions for you, or is this legal, is that legal, can you do this, can you do that? And it may not even have anything to do with your jurisdiction, but you still get them anyway. So those were some of the things that were brought up in the conversation. So when I see the mayor, I'll ask him again.
All the more reason why it would be $0.
Right.
So adding a 0 line item to the budget shouldn't be painful, is what I'm saying. So tell them that we asked and we want to know.
I will do that.
Any other discussion items, anyone? All right, can I get a motion?
One last thing I'll add before we adjourn, our golf tournament is May 10th. It's in 2 weeks at Boscobel. So anybody wants to help volunteer, let me know. But okay, we got to add you to the list. All righty, thank you.
All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? All right,